Hi guys, just want to welcome you to episode number 3. I actually had a little bit of technical issues with this one, but I didn't want to go ahead and just throw this one out the window. So apologies for the bad audio, but please enjoy this great conversation I had with my friend Christopher Gomez. Hi guys, we're back for a third episode of Open Ended. This is Karina Perez, and today we're here with film and theater actor Christopher Gomez to discuss 2020, the year that just keeps on giving and giving. Christopher, welcome to the podcast.
Karina, it's so nice to finally be able to do this with you. I know that we had some hiccups along the way, but
Yeah,
thank you for having me on.
absolutely. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I know this is like our third time giving this a shot, but super happy to finally sit down with you and have some time to pick your brain and whatnot.
Sure. That's what it's all. That's what this month is all about: picking brains. Ooh.
um, so Christopher, a great way to start this, I feel, instead of just asking the typical like, "How are you?" or "How are you doing?" in the
Yeah.
midst of all this craziness right now in 2020. You actually mentioned something a couple of weeks back to me that was so interesting, and I really liked what you said. You
Okay.
spoke about when asking somebody how they're doing, that it should always have layers in regards to that question. Like, how is someone doing in regards to their day to day? And how is someone coping with, let's say, matters of the heart and emotions? So you feel like that question is kind of a layer of questions. And
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I mean, and it's funny because it was the first time that I caught myself doing that,
Mm-hmm.
where I kind of uh, compartmentalized different areas of my life.
Sure.
What areas of what was going well. Um, I think like when we spoke, I kind of had like this imaginary grid where I visualized, okay, well, in this area I'm doing really well, in this area I'm doing not so well, and then this area is kind of so. So like for example, uh, areas domestic areas, between my family and I they were going great. I
Mm-hmm.
just spent some time with my family traveling up north.
Awesome.
Had a great week with them. And then the financial area was kind of, picking up. So that was cool. Health wise was great. And then like, as far as, like mental was going okay. And then the emotional area was like, just took a shitstorm. Can I say that
Yeah,
on the
you're
air?
good.
Okay.
You're absolutely good.
Yeah. But like the one that was like, that needed the most to work on was the emotional area. But in a way, it by doing it that way, it made me grateful for the good things that I did have.
Mm-hmm.
The family life, having a roof over my head, job situation picking up.
Mm-hmm.
And so it kind of made me embrace the little things that I kind of overlook when I'm dealing with the emotional stuff.
Right, all right. Yeah, I thought that was such a great way to put it, Christopher, because sometimes we just ask that question, expect kind of like either I'm great or it's been pretty bad. It's been stressful. Like we never get deep into it. And
Yeah,
sometimes, especially right now, we all have these layers to kind of peel away at. And some aspects of our life may be great right now, but then other aspects, just given the situation, are just kind of taking a toll more than anything.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I really appreciate you kind of opening my eye up, or my eyes up to that. I feel like when
Well,
I
thank
asked
you.
the question at the beginning of the podcast, like, how are you? How are you dealing with everything right now? It's very generic, and I love the way you approach that.
Well, thank you. And I'm kind of happy that you honed in on that because, well, like I had mentioned, it was the first time that I caught myself doing that,
Mm-hmm.
and it's it's a something that I would like to embrace more in conversation with other people because I think it's a healthy way to be grateful for the things that you do have and then work on the areas that need improvement. And it also gives a more honest answer, like you said, rather than just okay, oh, I'm doing all
Right.
right. No,
Yeah,
I'm
the
fine. And
typical,
I
like,
still do
how
that.
are you? Doing great. And then you're like going through a bunch of steps. So it's like, it's kind of like an American way of doing things. Or, I mean, there's a
Yeah, and
couple
it
different ways.
doesn't move
Yeah.
yeah, and it doesn't move the conversation forward.
Right. Yeah.
But part of that, and it makes sense too, is that sometimes when we find ourselves in unflattering situations, we're too embarrassed to share those things, you
Hmm.
know, for fear of judgment, for fear of, that, we can't get our shit together, whatever it may be. So
Right.
we kind of get self-conscious about how much is too much to share.
Right.
And,
Fearful of oversharing at this point. But you know
right.
what? It's really crazy to like, it's crazy to see how many people are going through personal stuff right now. On top of all that, we're already going through so much as a country and as a planet. So it's been really crazy to see people kind of opening up a little bit more to one another because we're all kind of going through a lot. One thing after another keeps coming up in our world, and it's
Yeah.
just overwhelming right now. Left and right, we're being punched every which way, and it's been crazy. Like since the last time I did a podcast with my friend Mary, the world was so different even then, and that was just maybe 2 to 3 months ago at this point.
Yeah.
So it's
And
really crazy to see how many things like just keep hitting us, and
yeah.
uh it's overwhelming. Yeah, as I've said.
Yeah. And even, and it's weird how social issues will infiltrate your personal relationships with people too, because I seldom post anything regarding politics or social issues on my personal Facebook page because
Hmm.
there's already too much of that from everybody. I go
Sure,
on my
that's
news
kind of what
feed and
it's
it's like,
become.
yeah, the one time I posted anything, and it was regarding the debates last week.
Hmm.
Uh, I I I lost a friend over that,
Yeah.
and but it was the way how that was handled that was upsetting because it showed that person's true character. That
Hmm.
there was no attempt at reconciling or saving the friendship. It was just you're done, goodbye.
Yeah, that's kind of
And
what it's come to for a lot of friendships, unfortunately.
yeah,
It's
and
what
it's
I keep
like,
seeing.
but what bothers me is that when people boast about respecting other people's opinions, but then they'll self-sabotage by posting their opinion, and you know if you're gonna comment on someone else's page,
Hmm.
disagreeing with them, you made a choice to post a comment. You should expect responses that are not going to align with yours.
Right, all right. It's
You made a
interesting that
choice.
Yeah, it's interesting, Christopher, that you bring up the whole social media dilemma right now. I know there's a documentary out called something of that name. Haven't quite watched it yet, but
It's ugly right now. It
it
is so
talks a
ugly.
lot about how social media has really just kind of changed the way politics in this country work, and how we really just see each other on either side of the spectrum. Like it feels like there's no in between sometimes
Right,
on
right.
these social networks.
Yeah.
It's just kind of crazy to see how we're either on the left or the right on social media. There's not really an in between. And I
Mhm.
feel the polar opposites have really been like engulfing, like the flames are just getting like bigger and bigger, like by the
Right.
week, as we get closer to this very historic election, November 3rd.
Yeah.
It's just crazy. Like I feel like I've been taking a little bit of time away from social media politically. I still use it obviously for connecting with my friends and
Yeah.
acquaintances, and expanding my creative circle, but I do feel like I've kind of quieted down in regards to politics.
Yeah.
Unlike in 2016, that was a whole different thing. I was very
Right, right.
openly like anti racism and anti Trump, and people that know
Yeah.
me kind of know where I lie in in that field of politics.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well,
I think
and back then it was just more of a feeling of disbelief.
right, all right, yeah. And now that we're living, the Trump presidency is kind of a little bit
Yeah.
different.
It's so, and it's really unfortunate that there's no middle ground. It's either black or white. There's
Mhm.
in a lot of conversation, it seems like nowadays there's a complete lack of nuance
Yeah.
and critical thinking, and I see that on both sides. And it unfortunately, while the majority of my views lean more towards the left,
Mhm.
it's one of the reasons why I can never fully subscribe to uh, you know one political party or the other,
Yeah.
because I see some good things about each one, and I see a lot of fallacies on both ends.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's tough. I think there's just people lack that cadence of respect in conversation, listening to each other. It's there. People are very sensitive about, and on both ends.
Yeah, and rightfully so. Like we're just in a time where people's opinions and their values are just so embedded because they've been like hurt for
Yeah.
maybe 4 years of this presidency. They've been like attacked directly,
Yeah.
with the racial civil unrest just a couple months back. Like
Hmm.
that's like deeply rooted hurt that was just really instigated by our government and
Yeah.
made worse instead of like kind of taking the role of leadership and trying to calm a nation in turmoil. The opposite happened,
Yeah.
and I think it just kind of spiraled out of control from civil unrest to political debates and political unrest.
Hmm.
It just kind of all became like a snowball effect in
Right,
recent
right.
months.
And it makes sense because within the human condition, when we're hurt, we immediately react.
Hmm.
And I think something that needs to be embraced and taught is to react without impulse, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
To not be impulsive about our reactions, to kind of take a moment and take a pause, and then you know find a way. I know it sounds too nice and too idealistic, but to find a way to muster up that emotional and mental strength to tackle a certain issue
The
with
issues at
the
hand,
with the
yeah.
proper cadence.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like lean against that because obviously it takes a critical brain to really, push
Yeah.
forward an agenda or some kind of change, um, and not like acting on only emotion. But of course, we're human. Our emotions are attached to the way we react and to the way that we're gonna try and change something in our
Yeah.
world politically or socially. So I totally get where you're coming from, Christopher, but it's really interesting to see kind of like how we need a little bit of both. We need the critical thinking. We need to be not as
Yeah.
impulsive as you've said, but also still attaching our emotions in a healthy way, I suppose.
Yeah. There was an example that I wanted to give, that in regards to being open to different points of view, because I
Hmm.
have a background in theater, and a lot of people that work within the arts, in a general sense, they do tend to lean more towards being liberal.
Hmm.
Heaven forbid there's going to be one person that has conservative beliefs.
Sure.
And the thing that I'm not down with is when, let's say I'm doing a show, and the majority of the cast, they're all liberals, and there's one person who's uh, has conservative beliefs,
Hmm.
and then they get pretty much ganged up by, or ostracized by, the rest of the cast and crew because of their political beliefs,
Hmm.
even if they weren't preaching. I'm not down with that. I don't think, if you meet someone whose views don't align with yours immediately, I don't think you should ostracize them immediately right then and there,
Mhm.
because you're I mean, depending on the extent of what they believe in, if they just we'll just say that they happen to be conservative, you're also denying yourself the possibility of a good friendship by finding common interests in other things
Sure.
that you could be bonded on. If it's again, it's it's all about finding nuance. There's gray areas. Now, racism, on the other hand, that's kind of a strong one that I'm
Right.
very
Like
very
you
much
said, someone
against.
that's not preaching, but they have conservative values. And
Right,
maybe they're a little bit like, they post on their social media certain like conservative thing or conservative things, but maybe not outright hate
right,
racism or support of leaders of that sort. Is what you're
right,
saying.
right.
Mhm.
And and it was what's sad to say is that I've seen people on the far left that have ostracized others for just marginally having conservative views. And
Mhm.
to me, tolerance goes both ways.
Mhm.
You don't look better. You should, by not acting that way. How do I convey this? It's almost hypocritical. You don't want to. You should present yourself as being better. Don't ostracize person because their beliefs don't align with yours.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a great thing to keep in mind, especially as we get closer to this election and there's going to be a lot of emotions and whatnot. Like, what we're
mhm.
all worried about is potential violence from either side.
Yeah.
And come election day or election results, whichever way we go, Biden or Trump, I'm nervous that there will be violence and protest and,
Yeah.
um, and that's just scary to think about. Like, it almost feels like it's like there's no way we're getting around that, regardless if Trump or Biden wins. It just feels like either extreme, left or right, is gonna
Damned
react
if you do, damned.
impulsively, as you said. I mean,
Yeah.
I will be pissed because I know that the way that America can heal from all of this is not a second Trump presidency, of course. But
Yeah.
I'm not like this Biden fangirl by any means. But
Right. Right.
I totally am just nervous because the extreme left and the extreme right are the most emotional about this right now, and the most extreme and the most impulsive, as you said.
Yeah.
And that's really scary. Like, how do we, the people in the middle, or the ones that are left leaning, but they're still, trying to keep the peace between one another, how do we
Right.
do that? And how do we keep promoting that within our circles and make sure that everybody we know is going to stay safe and I safely protest? I'm all open for safely protesting a
Yeah.
presidency that doesn't, come out with the best results come November.
Yeah. Yeah.
But how do we stay safe? How do we keep the democracy alive? That's what I'm scared about mostly.
See, yeah, that's something that I worry about too, because, and I'm about to say something somewhat controversial here, but this can be edited out, correct? All right. Um, the sad truth is that whatever you may whatever you may feel about Trump, you cannot deny the fact that his presence alone has instigated so much violence and unrest.
Mhm.
Not once has that man made any attempt to bring about
Unify.
peace.
Yeah,
Yeah,
unify, which is what
unify.
we stand for. Like, it's in our name.
Yeah,
United States of America. We're not this like rival just because we're from a different state because you're from a blue or a red state. You know what I mean? Like, we are
yeah,
supposed to be working together. What happened to the unity that we felt after 9/11? Like, yeah, I was young when that happened, but I still remember the unity we felt as a country, regardless
yeah,
if you were
absolutely.
left or right leaning. So why
Yeah,
have we lost out on that? I think it kind of brewed with Trump and just kind of what he stands for and what he lacks as a leader.
yeah. And you know what's sad is that I was almost expecting that unity to take place again with the pandemic.
Oh, same here,
And
same
I
here.
would have thought, and you know what's, I can't remember who I told this to. I don't think it was with you, but I told this to someone that and not to sound morbid here, but for the past 2 or 3 years, I was almost not necessarily wanting, but expecting something close on a 9/11 type level to
Mhm.
happen.
To kind of wake us all up, kind of. You needed
Yeah,
something that was really just
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
shake us up
And
for the better.
I was kind of hoping that this pandemic would have been it.
Hmm.
That this would have been the thing to scare people into unity.
Yeah, I actually felt very similar, Christopher. And I think the first few weeks of lockdown, I think we were kind of there.
We were
I think,
almost there.
yeah,
Yeah,
we were almost there. It was
yeah,
just what came after is just so toxic
yeah.
that it just like undid everything that we were like standing together with.
Well, because they politicized it.
Hmm.
And it's funny how history repeats itself, because that's kind of what I saw with 9/11. You had this big catastrophe. In
Hmm.
the beginning, everybody's unified, and then down the road, it becomes politicized.
Right.
It
Conspiracy
wasn't
theorist and like,
conspiracy, and then in 2003 we went to war, and
yeah.
then it became about uh, Bush versus Republicans versus that's kind of where it started to you know Democrats versus Republicans, that started to
Politicized once again. Yeah.
get ugly. It
Hmm.
was right after 9/11, because maybe it's because we were too young to see it, but I never got that sense of ugliness, in the 80s and the early 90s. But then
Hmm.
again, maybe I was too young for that, so there probably was, and we just didn't see it. But
Right. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like the same thing. Pandemic breaks out. There's because there's that fear of the unknown and that fear of uncertainty that united us,
Hmm.
and then very quickly it got politicized, and then it was weird. It became about science versus politics. It was so weird.
Yeah. And
It's so
now,
weird.
of course, we haven't even mentioned this quite yet, Christopher, but the whole world knows at this point that Trump has now tested positive for
Yeah.
COVID. So
Oh
I
my
have
God.
no idea how to process that, honestly.
Saturday Night Live is going to have a field day with that
Oh,
premise.
yeah, they kind of already hinted at it last night with Jim Carrey's little
Yeah,
SNL skit.
it's so
Yeah,
ripe
it's
for
just so
material.
crazy to me. It's just like this man like did not follow any of the rules that scientists have been saying will help you and help you
Yeah.
catch COVID. Help you from catching it. And it's just so insane because so many people now are coming out like, do we trust this man? Like, is he even
Mhm.
telling you the truth about potentially having it? Like, he's in the hospital right now, but we have no idea because it's like the guy, this
Yeah.
guy is practically the boy that cried wolf at this point. We don't know if he's
Yeah.
telling the truth, if he actually is sick, if he never even had it and he's just trying to get away from like the next debate. I have no idea what this
Well,
man's
yeah, and that's the
crazy
thing
plan
that
is.
pisses me off is how convenient the
I
timing
know.
of it is.
Absolutely.
Oh,
And
you
even,
know,
I mean, I'm not one to wish any, um, you know, illness upon anyone, even my enemy.
yeah,
So obviously, I don't want the man to die. I want him to
right,
lose by a huge margin come November 3rd. And I want him to be tried for a lot of things in
right,
court. Um, but I don't wish this man to die, obviously. I just do not
right.
think he belongs in our political system, in our government. He has no need to be there anymore. But
Yeah.
that's if he's sick. But still, part of me is like, how am I supposed to believe that he is sick when it's just kind of like his doctor, his main doctor, is like spewing things to the media that are just not lining up. It's just
Yeah.
very strange.
And it's the position that he's in. He's going to get the best doctors money can buy. The best treatment,
Yeah.
and that's just going to give validation for him to go on the air and say, oh, it's not that bad, or it's treatable, and it's
Hmm.
really you know not as harmful.
Yeah,
Just
maybe when you have 12 doctors attending to your every
exactly.
need.
Yeah. um there's also the theory that, again, going back to the how convenient the timing of it is,
Mhm.
he wasn't looking too good after that debate.
Nope,
Especially when
absolutely
he
not.
was,
Mhm.
especially after being posed the question of would you condemn white supremacy,
Mhm.
and with the backlash that he was getting, the timing of him getting sick was just so convenient, uh, that everybody's theorizing, oh, is he trying to get out of the debate? Yeah, does he know that he's going to lose, and that's why, yeah,
Yeah,
there's too many motives. There's
absolutely.
too many motives and possible hidden agendas.
I honestly hope that all of this speculating is just like us being like on our guard and that he really is sick, and that obviously I hope he recovers and that he just kind of, loses momentum even more so in his like rallies, and just kind of
Yeah,
like slow has like a slow ending to his presidency. You know what I mean? Like he kind of fades
yeah,
out it really slowly, and that we don't see like a bunch of backlash or him not wanting to give up his like power come,
yeah.
election day or something.
An empty victory
Yeah,
for him and
absolutely.
his supporters.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
We can only hope.
yeah. It's so strange.
Yeah, strange times we're living in. Absolutely. Like I said, so much has happened since the last podcast, Christopher. That I feel like there's just a list of things in my head right now, from the political unrest, the racial
Mhm.
issues in this country, the Trump presidency, and the pandemic of all things. Like, where
Yeah,
are we right now? I just feel like even here in California, we had even an extra added element with the fires, the wildfires,
yeah,
in San Diego and LA and Northern California, and
yeah,
even more into Oregon and Washington, which is insane.
yeah. It was so scary because we were up there when that was going on. Um, that was taking place around the same week that my family and we were vacationing up north.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point we were driving, I think it was on Highway 1. We were
Yeah.
trying to get to Fort Bragg, and we were driving through the what's called the Avenue of Giants, where
Mm-hmm.
you're like going through the redwoods,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and beautiful, had it not been for the sepia tone Batman Begins palette
All
of
the
the
ash
sky.
falling from the
Yeah,
sky, all the haze and smoke.
yeah,
Absolutely.
and it was at one point it actually got kind of scary because we were about to run out of gas, and one of the main roads that we needed to go on was closed off,
Mm-hmm.
and were we going to have enough gas to turn around? There was all these like factors that were kind of putting us on the edge of our
Oh yeah,
seats,
that sounds really
literally,
stressful.
sitting in the car on the edge of
Sure.
our seats. But yeah,
But yeah,
we
those
made
fires were crazy. And you were up north for the majority of the fires, or were you in
it.
Los Angeles County as well at some point through that?
We left when some of it was starting.
Oh, okay.
So like the El Dorado fire, the ones, the Yucaipa ones, those were going on,
Mm-hmm.
and we left. I think it was the second week of September.
Sure.
We flew to Sacramento and spent most of our time near Willow Creek and Eureka. We drove up to Crescent City at one point, and Crescent City, I believe, is the last city before you hit the Oregon
Oh, for sure. Right
border.
on the border. Sure.
Yeah. So we were up there for a few days in the areas between Eureka, Crescent City,
Mm-hmm.
Oric, and uh, Arcata, like all that area. And yeah, it was strange because we got up at 8 in the morning, and at 9 a.m. This is in Eureka. At 9 a.m., it it looked like the sun had not even come up yet. People still had their
Right.
headlights. No, up until like 10 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah,
People
I know
still
we
had their
had,
headlights on.
yeah, we saw all these photos circulating on social media for like
Yeah,
the Golden Bridge in San Francisco and things
yeah,
like that. And it was like a bright red. It was like a scene out of Blade Runner. If you've seen the
yes,
movie, it's
yeah,
exactly like that. A bright orangey red color, and a layer of haze and just flames. It's kind of what sums up the year, if anything.
Yeah, I feel like this year is like post-apocalyptic, uh, like second-rate post-apocalyptic lifestyle. We got all the
Right.
elements are there. The sky is, just horrendous. There's civil unrest.
The
There's a virus
screenwriters
going
are
on.
having way too much fun with us this year.
Oh
That's
yeah.
what that's what it feels like.
The only thing that's missing are zombies and giant monsters, and yeah,
We're
but
not far from it. I mean,
we're
it's
not
still
far
like
from it.
early October. Who knows what's going to happen? I just hope those
Agreed.
like crazy clowns from a couple years ago don't come back. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking
I
about.
just don't need that this year. I'm
Yeah,
fine without that.
yeah. It's
Totally
gonna
fine
be
without
fake Antifa members,
that. Oh my gosh. Yes. Okay. That's yeah, that's something else. Like,
like far right members dressed as Antifa, trying to start
oh,
riots,
don't give them any
and then blame it
ideas.
on
That sounds
yeah,
horrible. That sounds horrible. But yeah, I'm not fond of clowns. I mean, I love all things Halloween. I'm an October baby, but clowns,
yeah,
especially creepy, like bloody clowns, are not my thing at all.
yeah. Pennywise, the Joker.
Yeah.
It's
um, so yeah, talking about all this stuff, it's just kind of reminding me that I really wanted to mention that is this like climate change also kind of changing California and our country with the fires just kind of coming out of nowhere this year and a lot earlier. Are we just getting like drier? Are we getting like hotter? I don't know. It's so insane to think about.
you. That's.
They're bigger
I'm
each year
sorry.
too, the wildfires.
Yeah, it's funny that people had brought climate change into the equation, because I am a believer that something needs to be done about climate
Mm-hmm.
change.
Absolutely.
I But in this instance, I have a hard time accepting that when it comes to these wildfires,
Mm-hmm.
because, well, for one, the El Dorado, I believe it was the El Dorado fire, where it was started by
Oh, the baby reveal
a
party.
gender reveal party,
Yeah.
and then the weather conditions too.
Weather
Lightning happened.
conditions, well, I'm not like well versed in this, so I'm not going to speak from like a scientific
Right.
stance. So don't hold me to it, whoever's listening. I'm just saying that it feels like obviously that baby reveal party and that became an issue because they started the fire. But it
Yeah.
does feel like the fact that our like land is drier and like
Mhm.
hotter, and it just kind of exacerbates whatever starts such fires. So yes,
It
climate
could. Yeah.
change is kind of like still in the realm of why these things are getting out of hand. It's not the instigator for every which
Right.
way. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, you said it much better than I did. That's what I was
Sure.
trying to. Yeah,
Yeah.
that it wasn't the instigator.
Yeah.
It might have played a factor, but yeah, I mean,
Hmm.
that's for you and I. That's our. We're not meteorologists. We're not. That's
Right,
not
right,
our
right.
forte.
I
That's
would love to sit down with someone that knows a lot more than I do in regards to that
yeah.
topic, because I really am genuinely interested in seeing what our weather patterns and our climate change data shows about how these storms are causing maybe like crazier amounts of lightning that then in dry areas
Yeah.
like in California, just set fires abloom. And it's just like,
Yeah.
it's really interesting. Like, how do we protect our land better? I actually was listening to this podcast not too long ago, Christopher, that
Mhm.
was talking about how Native Americans used to do controlled burns of the land.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you heard about that at all.
Vaguely, but not too much. But
Sure.
yeah, if you don't mind elaborating on that,
Sure, sure, sure.
I'd like to hear
So it was really interesting. What I learned from this podcast was that Native Americans tended to the land in a way where they burned shrubbery and like really
it.
dried areas so that they wouldn't catch fire, and
Interesting. So
become massive wildfires.
it's like playing
Yeah,
reverse psychology on nature.
Exactly that, and like respecting it, like knowing that certain areas have to be burned so that there could be new life. That's just the way that
Okay.
Native Americans saw it. And I also learned that this became illegal for Native American tribes to practice because of the fear of causing wildfires. But it's kind
Yeah.
of crazy because it's like this loop of
It
like,
comes full circle.
it's trying to be preventative. It's trying to be respectful of the land. It's trying to be, uh, respectful of the life in the land so that we don't
Yeah.
cause these huge fires by leaving all this shrubbery and, dry plants and stuff all over.
Yeah.
So I thought it was so eye opening. I had no idea about this. I had no prior knowledge to it. And I thought that was such a beautiful way to kind of just make sure that these wildfires don't get out of hand the way they do.
Yeah. It's
Obviously, I don't know to what extent the science goes and how much we can really do this, but at least to some extent, it sounds like, a pretty logical way of looking at things.
yeah. And slightly off topic, but kind of staying within the realm of what you just talked about, it kind of reminded
Mhm.
me of a question to ask you that I don't know if you would care to elaborate on your podcast, but I came across I think it was an Instagram story that you posted
Mhm.
where you mentioned that for quite some time you grew up or spent some time on a reservation.
Yes, a lot of
What was
people
that
actually
about?
a lot of people that know me don't even actually know that, but I grew up in an Indian reservation for the first 9 years of my life. I am
Okay.
not Native American by like culture or anything like that. I am 100% Mexican American.
Mhm.
But that's just where my family was living at the time.
Yeah.
They rented land from a native, and um, that was our landlord. So
Yeah. Yeah.
he had his little farm right next to us. It was like out in the countryside, still San Diego County. Um,
Okay.
but it's like Valley Center kind of area, a little bit east of that. Now it's like very different from when I grew up there. Now there's like a big
Right.
casino, when there's like a lot of tourism that comes into
Yeah.
there. But when I was living there in the 90s, like it was so different. And
Yeah.
I loved growing up with that, sense of culture of Native Americans around me. I got to go to a lot of the powwows. My mom was actually a teacher at one of the small schools there.
Oh, cool.
A lot of her coworkers were native. And yeah, it was just really cool. For me, it was just so normal back then that
Right.
I didn't realize that this is not what people are exposed to like on a
Yeah.
regular basis.
Well, because you
Um,
were exposed to that at um oh my gosh, I just had a brain fart. I was going to say the word. A, it starts with an I. It's a very common word I use all the time in my vocabulary. Oh my
no
gosh.
worries. It happens to all of us.
Impressionable. Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Because
that's a good one. Yes.
yeah, because you were exposed to all of that at such an impressionable age that it didn't stick with you until much later that it's I don't want to say out of the norm, but that other most people were not as
Most
acquainted with that.
Americans were acquainted
Yeah.
with, yeah, and it's just it's so funny because it's not even like I lived like in a different state or a different city than like most of my
Yeah, it was
friends,
here.
but it's just I lived in a different area that was more, it's not very city like, it's more remote country. And
Yeah.
then I moved to the city when I was like 9 or 10, so yeah.
Yeah, but see, that's kind of cool though because it adds something new. It adds something unique to your upbringing that I think most people in conversation with you would find would be curious about. I don't know. I,
Yeah,
I think that's something to embrace. That I think that's something that should be shared more if an opportunity and a conversation for that would come up.
sure. Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
funny, Christopher, because it's such a part of me that like I don't even realize that it's an interesting topic. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
So it's really funny to be like, oh, it's just like common knowledge, right? But then even my best friend probably didn't know until recently when I posted that story. I'm sure I've told her
Yeah.
in passing, but maybe she just didn't really understand what I meant.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, no, I lived in an actual reservation. like my neighbors were either Mexican or Native American. That's really
Yeah.
it. I mean, I had a couple like Caucasian neighbors, but that was kind of like the minority where I grew up.
Right.
So
Right.
it was really interesting. Like, it's like, oh, like I was actually more of a majority, and like, Native Americans and Mexicans share a lot of
Hmm.
cultural similarities. Obviously, our DNA to some extent can also be traced back to Native
Yeah.
Americans. Um, but obviously, I don't associate, or I don't claim to be, oh, I am Native American. That's a
Yeah.
whole other thing. I claim myself as just culturally Mexican American because I was
Cool.
born in the US. I wasn't born in Mexico, so I don't feel quite like I can say I am culturally just Mexican either. So
Right. Right.
yeah,
Again, like I think it's something to bring up in conversations when you can, when it's discreet and appropriate to bring it up, because I think it's
absolutely.
a very unique
Yeah,
aspect about your upbringing.
absolutely.
It
Absolutely.
it kind of makes up who you are in a way, because it's a part of you. Like that's how you grew an appreciation for that. I don't know if that makes
Mhm.
sense, but
No, I totally get it. I think I've always been somewhat of a open-minded person to different cultures. Even when I was a kid, I feel like I've always been so attracted to anything that's foreign and not like just home. Like,
yeah,
I'm sure you know that I travel like a lot. In recent years, I've been traveling a lot up until the pandemic. Um,
yeah,
and it's because I get so much excitement out of learning about different cultures and getting to know people from different parts of the world and that are just so different than me, but yet they're
yeah.
also similar to me, if that makes
Right,
sense.
right. Yeah. It's kind of fun that, wherever you go in the world, there seems to be a general sense of, you know domestic tasks, if you will,
Hmm.
that are universally the same everywhere
Right.
you go. Anywhere in the world that you go, there's the idea of people having a family, kids,
A
you know,
job. Hmm.
a job, providing. It's a universal thing. But what I love too is all the that's what's similar to everybody. But then we have these quirks, these interests, these the things about our upbringing that are so vastly different. But then
Hmm.
there's as much similarities. There's as much universal similarities as there are cultural differences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great thing to remember, especially in such an extreme political climate that we're in, that we should see one another um,
Mhm.
in the very same way that I see a different culture. I need to see my opposing conservative American with the same respect, in hopes that they see me with the
Yeah.
same respect. um, I think seeing our common like humanity is the most important thing. Obviously, like I said, there is extremists on both sides, which sometimes
Yeah.
things just do not,
Yeah.
the respect isn't there, obviously.
Yeah.
um, so I think it's a great thing to point out that we have to see our common humanity, whether we're traveling, whether we're in a heightened political climate in the US, and whether we're just you know I don't know, talking to our neighbor. Like, how do we respect each other's um uniqueness, I suppose.
I don't know. There just needs to be a level of acceptance,
Mhm.
and it like I it, you know and it just got me thinking about the the friend that decided to end the friendship um,
Mhm.
because of things that were said regarding the debate.
Yeah.
And it's you know we ended our communication praising each other
Mhm.
for the respect that we showed even in disagreement. but yeah, but regardless of what action he took, that level of respect that we showed each other needs to be embraced more. I think we need to listen to each other more,
Mhm.
and there needs to be a level of acceptance, and the other thing too is that, yeah, it's nice to be among a group of people that thinks the way you do, that
Mhm.
is of like minds, but at the same time it can also get kind of bland. I You want to have people that have opposing views so that you can have discussion.
Mhm.
Without discussion, how are
There's
both
no
sides going to
growth
be,
on the other side, yeah.
yeah, how are you going to be enlightened to other people's views?
Mhm.
I think there needs to be discussion, but I also think there needs to be discussion where there's a level of respect. And if you're going to engage in that kind of a discussion, you have to prepare yourself. You have to mentally prepare yourself to hear things that may be harsh truths or may be upsetting to you. And yeah, just it's all about listening
Mhm.
and having thick skin.
And trying to educate instead of like um just kind of like yelling at someone. I think obviously, like we
Yeah.
said, we're not talking about the extremes. If someone is outwardly being racist, sexist, you know, all of the above, that's totally different. Or
Yeah.
violent, that is not what we're trying to condone at all. But someone that's just in need of a little bit of like education maybe, and you just kind of have to walk them through why
Mhm.
um that is the most humanistic or like most peaceful way of looking at things or something of that nature, instead
Yeah.
of being like reprimanding them for believing something that might have just been something that they grew to value just because of their generation. Boomers and whatnot just think differently. They grew up very differently, so we have to
Oh,
try our best.
yeah, it totally is a generational thing
Yeah.
because as soon as I started hearing this slogan of "Keep America Great" or "Make America Great Again,"
Yeah.
my initial visualized perception was 1950s suburbia. Like
Mm.
that's what you know, good, common Christian common core values. Like that was the idea
Yeah.
that I felt like they were preaching. And
Right.
so much of the world has changed in 60 years that, it's, I mean, yeah, it's nice to go back to certain aspects of that, but you
Mhm.
cannot expect a whole nation to go completely uh, to regress,
Right.
because
Yeah. Just because you liked it that way. Like we're
yeah,
progressing in a different way. Back then women were just housewives.
yeah,
They
and
had no
also that was
voting.
the romanticized version of the 1950s.
Right.
Like we didn't see the civil unrest that most people didn't talk about. We didn't see
Mhm.
the segregation. We didn't see the uh, individuals that were struggling mentally with
Yeah.
whatever internal demons that they had to that you couldn't talk about back then. So
Right. Going further back, like women weren't even allowed to vote. Like what a
yeah,
crazy difference that is today. And to think, generations and generations ago, less and less people had rights unless you were a white man. And now
yeah,
because rights are being given to black men and Mexican women such as myself, and that seems like we're being more inclusive. If all lives matter, then why don't all lives get to vote and have a say?
yeah, yeah,
So I think that whole boomer mentality, not every boomer, of course, there's amazing boomers out there, but
yeah,
the boomer mentality of make America great again, and make it like it was between this year and this year, and that's a way of the past. Every
yeah.
generation has thought forward. Why think backwards? You should want the next generation that comes after you to be better. You should not want worse for them.
Right, right. And I mean, man, there's just so many layers to that topic. Uh, because
You seem stressed.
yeah,
It's a
like just
stressful
like just even,
topic.
yeah, I think that's going to be like a whole other tangent, but yeah, it at the end of the day, it's a romanticized version of the American dream.
Yeah.
But the American
The ever
dream,
dying American dream.
yeah, but it's like the American dream has evolved, and the American dream has meant different things for different people.
Hmm. We need to keep looking forward instead of backwards. And that conservatives, for the most part, you know, extreme right wants to go backwards. And I think that's
Yeah,
where I don't agree with whatsoever. Um, Everyone deserves rights, no matter age, skin color, ethnicity, race, whatever you want to call it.
hmm,
We all deserve the same rights, be it
yeah,
political, socially, economically. We all
yeah,
need to be treated as human beings and not kind of labeled or sorted into specific categories of who deserves
yeah,
more or who is more um, important in the society.
yeah. And I'm grateful that with my upbringing, that was never really an issue,
Mm-hmm.
because so the first 6 years of my life, I lived in El Monte, California, which is like 20 to 30 minutes east of LA.
Mm-hmm.
It's East
Yeah,
LA.
pretty familiar with it myself.
Yeah. And the first kid that I ever played with was the next door neighbor who were black.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the first friends that I ever made in kindergarten, one was from the United Kingdom, and the other one was also from Argentina.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I also was, you know, I befriended other people of different Hispanic. Uh, what's the word?
Different countries of
Different
yeah,
countries, yeah,
Spanish speaking countries, sure.
different Spanish-speaking countries, and so it was the whole growing up. The whole race thing was never. I like it wasn't. It was never a thing to consider.
Mm-hmm.
And it's weird too, because going into the Halloween season, um, I've kind of jokingly said, but there's a lot of truth to it too, that I learned more about tolerance from watching old monster movies than I did in academic settings.
Yeah.
Because when I was a kid, I grew up watching the classic monster movies from Universal Studios and Hammer Studios, where
Mm-hmm.
most of those movies, the monster was kind of the misunderstood outcast. And so that taught me at an early age, that taught me about tolerance, that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the things we fear eventually become things that we love. Being exposed to Godzilla movies at a really young age, that opened up the window of embracing and being enlightened by just Asian culture in general.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm very thankful that I've had that exposure.
Right. And
And
what we don't realize, I feel like so many other people in the South or like,
yeah,
central US don't get that kind of exposure. Like we forget sometimes how exposed to cultures and different races we
yeah,
are here, like in California and Los Angeles and San Diego, that we just tend to forget like how
mhm,
many other people like just don't have connection. They see it as a very alien thing to them, seeing a person of
yeah.
color. It's just insane.
I also believe too, it's also where my parents ended up migrating to, that
Mm-hmm.
also kind of shaped my upbringing.
Yeah.
So both of my parents are from South America,
Mm-hmm.
but of all places in the United States, they ended up living in Southern California. And
Mm-hmm.
Southern California is such a melting pot of different cultures and different ethnicities, much like New York.
Right.
So you're exposed to all these different ideas, different foods, just the different languages,
Mhm.
everything. And so yeah, it whereas I think about if my parents had migrated to Louisiana, it would probably be a much different kind of upbringing.
Mhm.
Definitely a different uh, flavor of exposure, but
Mhm.
yeah, I also it depends. I think sadly it also depends geographically where our upbringing comes from.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just kind of out up to us too. I feel like if we are in
Hmm.
middle America, we need to expose ourselves to different types of people,
Yeah,
and kind of open up your mind a little bit, because there's so many people in this country that don't ever even leave their state. They never
yeah,
leave, or they never leave the US. And just see it as like this all sustained country that you never have to leave because everything you ever needed is here.
yeah,
And that's just such a close minded way of looking at things. It's so eye opening when you leave the US and you realize that there are so many things I didn't realize
mhm,
that I would prefer in another country that my country would never do, or that,
right,
that would never offer these kinds of social services, or um, just ways of life. Like they would never be like
yeah,
that. Like the common one is being like the 30 hour work week. That is so not something
mhm,
that the US has ever really attained or talked about. Maybe a little bit more recently with everybody kind of working remote for office
yeah,
jobs. But at the same time, it's just like now we're just being overworked at home with remote jobs. Now you're just kind of working overtime. You're always on
yeah,
the
yeah,
clock, which is the total opposite of what we've been trying to get at in this country.
yeah,
Full-time hours honestly do not need to be more than 30 hours a week for
yeah,
most jobs. Obviously I'm talking about like jobs that you can do like in office or from home. Obviously customer service jobs are a little different,
mhm,
but yeah, just being paid better wages even if you have a customer service job. Those are necessary jobs. As we've learned through this pandemic, they are essential
yeah.
jobs.
And I want to elaborate on that because I have a love-hate relationship with Bill Maher.
Yeah.
There's some things that I disagree with, and there's some things that I do agree with. And one of the things that I do agree with, what he said, is that as Americans, we are overworked.
Mhm.
And my cousin, who's around the same age as you,
Mhm.
maybe a little bit younger, he, his father's Mexican.
Yeah.
His mother's from Argentina. His father is Mexican. He's very strongly tied to his Mexican roots as well. Um, he his girlfriend is from Germany. They met in college. She was a foreign exchange student,
Mhm.
and right after the 2016 elections, he moved to Germany, just outside of Berlin, to live with his girlfriend, and
Yeah.
he's been there since. And so it's really cool to hear about everyday life in Germany from a Mexican American.
Mhm.
And yeah, one of the things, like they'll take the majority of August off as vacation. You
And
know,
free university, is he like honing in on that, like going to school or anything?
well, the thing, yeah, he already graduated
Oh,
from
okay.
from UCR in political science,
Got it.
and then he ended up in Germany. So,
There you
with
go.
yeah, and it's kind of funny in a way, kind of full circle because so many so many Germans migrated to Mexico at one point. And then
Mhm.
there's also the stories of Nazis migrating to Argentina as well, which is a
Right, right,
whole
right.
other rabbit
Whole other
hole.
story.
Yeah, which is actually, it's interesting, but it's interesting in a creepy kind of way.
Mhm.
Yeah, like there's areas down in South America, in Chile, where there's towns that are still very much into that.
Oh, wow.
And
I didn't actually know that. That's pretty
yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
Um, Have you gone back to Argentina in recent years? Or I know you're born in the US, correct? But
Yes,
you've been going back and forth, like, do you have family still out there?
I have extended family out there. My parents usually go back every now and then. The
Hmm.
last time I was there was in '94.
Oh, wow. Okay. So
So
yeah, that's a
I'm,
long time. I
yeah,
was gonna
I'm
ask.
overdue for a visit.
Yeah.
But at the same token, so many of my extended family have come to visit us here,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's also kind of rewarding to to show them around, because they've always been curious about the United States and the good things that this country does have to offer,
Hmm.
and the landmarks that you see
In movies
in
everywhere.
movies and magazines. So
Sure.
that's kind of cool and rewarding. um, and then it's like at the end of the day, yeah, there's nice places to visit in Argentina, but for me, the only reason I would have a strong desire to go back there is to see extended family. And
Hmm.
so if I have so many extended family come here and visit, it kind of diminishes that
The
desire.
reason to go over there. Yeah.
Yeah. And now with Facebook, it's like it even more
Sure.
so decreases the
Yeah. So
desire.
94 it is. That's where you left it at.
Yeah. It was the
94.
second time I went because I went when I was 2 years old, I think in 82 or 83.
Hmm.
83 probably. Yeah.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Super cool.
Yeah,
Well,
because
that's
my
really
brother was
cool.
because my brother was conceived down there. He was born in '83.
Your brother right now is going to be like, why did you just say that? Why did you tell the world this? Why did you tell YouTube this? That's great though.
I was a
uh,
twinkle in the eye near the Kern River.
oh no, your poor brother. Um, Kind of to change topics here, Christopher, for the sake of your brother. For those that don't know who you are, or haven't met you quite yet, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you do? We haven't really touched upon your film and theater acting. Maybe even throw in a little bit of how we met.
Yeah, yeah. So in high school, actually, it started when I was in the eighth grade. Uh, I took a drama class, and yeah, all 4 years of high school, I did drama, and then right out of high school, I started doing community theater. Was in all kinds of shows. Did West Side Story.
Hmm.
Ironically, playing the white guy that falls in love with the Hispanic girl.
Oh yeah.
And what's ironic is that the girl that was playing the Hispanic girl was actually white. So it was like this like weird bizarro world.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was cool. Like doing shows in community theater, and then like kind of receiving some accolades from that, and then just
Hmm.
kind of moving on up to doing like more like regional theater, doing like paid gigs, being part of the ensemble and like big regional musical theater shows, and then eventually just doing kind of a mishmash of doing extra work on big budget Hollywood films and doing you know working as supporting or leading actors in
Hmm.
low budget films or playing monsters in horror films.
Oh, there you go.
uh,
There comes the monster love.
yeah, yeah. Which I love. And yeah, so you know, I kind of slide in between doing behind the camera stuff, but I love doing more of the in camera stuff as well.
Hmm.
Probably, yeah, maybe equally, but yeah, a little, yeah, pretty balanced.
Yeah, I definitely
Uh,
met you more as the actor than the
yeah.
behind the scenes person. You have such a vibrant personality that you belong in front of the camera.
You think so?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so you got to hire me for one of your things.
There you go. Yeah, there you go. I need to get going on my scripts, and
Yeah,
hopefully post pandemic I got movies coming.
yeah. But that's
But
just like kind of the gist of it.
yeah.
Trying now, I'm like trying to get into like doing like more voiceover stuff,
Oh, awesome.
and yeah, so I've been doing that and doing theater
Hmm.
still,
Yeah,
or at least before the lockdown,
absolutely.
and yeah,
Yeah, so you want to tell people how we met? I know it was at the audition at Universal Studios.
Yes, it's a
This
story
was
that keeps
a
on giving.
few years back at this point.
Yeah. So you and I met in 2012.
Hmm.
We were both sitting next to each other at an audition to be tour guides for the Universal Studios Hollywood studio tour, the
That's
tram tour,
right. Yeah.
the world renowned, I should say,
That's
uh,
right. It is. It is.
studio
It's an
tour.
awesome ride.
And yeah, we just started talking. You mentioned you were from San Diego, and it had been a while at that point. It had been a while since I've last visited San Diego, so I had expressed interest in wanting to visit San Diego again, just in general. And
Hmm.
yeah, stayed in touch since then.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, yeah. I remember I had just moved to LA maybe a month before I met you there.
Uh-huh.
I was going to school up there for film production, and I went and auditioned for this role slash gig,
Yeah,
and they wanted someone that was bilingual, so I kind of got a little bit of a head start there with applying to that rather than just the English studio tour guide. But yeah, it was so fun. I don't quite remember if we talked afterwards or what happened. Do you recall?
yeah. I mean, it. I think it definitely had to do. It had to have been a film oriented discussion
It must have been, yeah.
because I mean, why are we there? You know.
Right. And yeah, I actually had recently told you that I didn't end up accepting the position, even though it was offered to me, only
Uh-huh.
because it kind of interfered with my school schedule and they weren't able to work around it. And I was in LA to kind of finish my degree. Um,
Yeah.
so unfortunately, I had to say no, but it was such an interesting experience the further I went into the interview process.
Yeah, tell
Um,
us about that because you made it a level past me
right.
because of the fact that you were fluent in Spanish.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Tell,
So yeah, it was
tell us
so
about that.
funny. I think I've mentioned to you that the follow up to the initial audition was a face to face interview with the head of the department,
Uh-huh.
and then kind of get a little bit of like a Spanish oral test of sorts. But yeah, it's kind of crazy to see where I would say child actors end up. I
Yes.
think child actors sometimes end up at Universal Studios apparently as the head of the department for the studio tour
Yeah.
guide.
Yeah, I've
um,
noticed that one of the casting, I think he was probably one of your casting directors too, was Benjamin Salisbury of TV's The Nanny.
that's him. That's the guy. I couldn't remember
Yeah.
his name, but he was the young kid in The Nanny, and he was the one
Yeah.
interviewing me. It was so funny because it's like I grew up watching and loving that show, so here I am, like getting an interview with him in his office. I'm like, wow, this is where they end up. It's just so strange to see where they go from like after being on television for so long as kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because years later I had auditioned for him and got a call back to do the voice for Optimus Prime when they were going to start implementing some of the Transformers characters to, you know, be physically there and interact with
Oh,
guests.
really? Okay, at Universal,
Yeah,
yeah. Very cool.
and yeah, it was cool. Like there was, you know, for whatever reason, you know, they ended up not going with me, but you know, same story. There's like 14, you know, 14 to 20 other people that you know, sound close to you. They only need
Right.
three, so it's gonna,
Nothing new in Hollywood. Nothing new in the life of an
yeah,
actor, right?
the nature of the beast.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, ever since we've kind of touched base every few months to every few years. And I know we've met up at like Comic Con a couple of times as well, which we didn't have this year.
Yeah,
So we're all pretty bummed over here still because of the pandemic. Obviously, Comic Con wasn't able to have their big event this year. Something I go to
Yeah.
every single year, and just this summer it didn't happen. And I'm a little worried that come next summer we might not have Comic Con still.
Yeah, I think because well, in even now, it's still a little premature to start opening things up when we're just now getting control of this thing.
Right, and we
And I
haven't
think
even
that's the
gone through
concern.
fall and winter quite yet, so that's what we're looking
Yeah.
out for.
Uh, at one point, there was a prediction that we were going to have a second lockdown in March,
Hmm.
but with the way how things are going now, I don't think we're going to have a second lockdown. But I feel like the restrictions are going to be not completely lifted, but a lot of it is going to be eased up by the beginning of next year, I feel.
Right. Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. Although I don't know that we'll see any semblance of normality until maybe summer of next year, maybe the end of next year. But I totally agree that we'll probably start seeing a lot more things opening up in hopes that we
Yeah.
have a safe winter.
Yeah.
And that it doesn't get like extremely bad like it was early on. But yeah, we're hoping that Comic Con for some reason is able to come back next year, even if they start planning now for, say, a fall Comic Con of next year.
Which I would be okay with.
Yeah, so
Which
maybe they should start planning that if there's no other conventions that are kind of in the way come next fall.
Yeah, I'm now I'm kind of curious to know what they're going to do about the Olympics because this past summer, my family and we were supposed to go to Japan
Mm-hmm.
because we had a very close family friend who was going to compete in the Olympics,
Oh, wow, yeah.
and that just kind of took a whole, uh,
Yeah, all these
turn.
public events are just kind of
Yeah,
in limbo. Big events too. Comic Con's huge here in San Diego. Olympics are even bigger.
yeah, and like
Um,
Comic Con is kind of like San Diego's Mardi Gras at this point.
yeah, absolutely.
It's gotten
Um,
so crazy.
yeah, like that one year, we headed over to that roof party. That was so much fun.
So much. Yeah, we still talk
Oh,
about that.
yeah,
Thank you, and again, thank you for giving us the deets on that
the
to
deets.
crash the party.
I sound like
Uh,
I'm actually really, really popular and have like a bunch of like VIP list with my name.
you know what? To us, you probably were because you're a San Diegan,
I'm a local San Diegan,
a
absolutely.
San Diegan native, a native of San Diego. Yeah,
Yeah, it was so much fun. And each year it's just gotten more and more fun to, hang out at Comic
yeah.
Con. I feel like the last summer, not the past one that didn't happen, but 2019 um
Mhm.
wasn't quite as enjoyable only because it was a lot more stressful. There was lines and lines that just kind of became crazier than ever before. Like I know that Comic Con is a lot of waiting, but I hope that
Yeah,
they figure out a way to strategize it for when it comes back bigger than ever
yeah,
after the pandemic, where they can make it more accessible once again because it's become extra stressful.
yeah,
Just like Disneyland has become extra stressful to some. Like it's not the same as it used to be because there's line after line. You have to get fast passes and VIP to cut lines and I don't know what.
yeah,
I feel like Comic Con has become that.
yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say two things that and it kind of goes in alignment with what you said that I
Mhm.
think in a weird way this might be a good thing for Comic Con because it I felt like it was getting too big
Yeah.
for its own good, and
Hmm.
I think with the pandemic it kind of will force the organizers to kind of reflect on what they can do. It
Hmm.
gives them the time to kind of improve certain things and have other things be more accessible
Yeah.
because for the past few years my friends and I we wouldn't even bother going inside. We just see all the free stuff that was outside, or just hang out at the Gaslamp district seeing all the drunken cosplayers, because like that's, that was enough for us, but at the same time, you do want to see guests speaking at the panels to talk about their
Mhm.
films or their future projects. So they need to find ways to make that a little bit more accessible. But I get it. The other thing I was going to bring up was, did you hear that Disneyland laid off like so many of their employees?
I did. Yeah, that's another one I just touched on Disneyland, but yeah, I read about that. I think it actually is 27,000 employees were laid off from both
Mhm.
parks, the Orlando and California combined. Is that my
Oh wow.
understanding?
Okay.
At first I thought it was like, wow, they have that many employees in Anaheim, California. Like it
Yeah.
seems like they laid off a combined 27,000. And I actually heard somebody recently say that their friend who worked at Disneyland as a Imagineer, an engineer as
Mm,
they call him at Disneyland,
yeah.
Imagineer, actually was laid off. So it's not just the part-time employees. I thought it was just like
Yeah.
mostly part-timers. And unfortunately, big events, big theme park situations, especially here in California, are may not be opening for a very long time. I recently also heard that Regal Cinemas is
Yeah.
closing all of their US locations and UK locations, which is insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I
I mean,
don't
to
know
an
if that's going to open up
yeah,
again, or I know they're laying off a ton of people as well. It's just crazy.
because Regal owns Edward Cinemas, correct? Like that's part of their
I believe
subsidiary.
so. I'm not 100% certain about that one, so don't hold me to it.
Yeah, that's a shame
Yeah.
because if they really put their heads together, they could have found ways to sustain their businesses,
Mhm.
and by that I mean like thinking outside the box, like
Drive in at their parking lots.
yeah, like at least put up one or two inflatable screens and use their parking lots to. I
Mhm.
mean, if Walmart can do it, you know,
Right.
I don't know, and then like retain your employees to have like a canopy with concession stands. I know
Mhm.
it sounds very idealistic, and I'm sure there's
Right.
probably much more. It's
More
probably
to
not
it.
as easy, but I mean, they had months to come up with to brainstorm ideas on how to
Mhm.
sustain
Yeah, I
some.
wonder how AMC is doing actually. I haven't been to a movie theater myself
Yeah,
since the pandemic started. I've been to drive-ins, as you know, you and I went together to
yeah,
one, socially distanced, of course.
yes,
But yeah, I haven't been to a movie theater since pre-COVID, and I don't know what's going on. Is AMC doing okay? I know that the new James Bond movie was recently delayed, and a lot of
yeah,
uh, theaters were cashing in on that. They were waiting
yeah.
for that
So
one
many
because,
movies got delayed,
yeah. Mhm.
and I feel bad for the people that worked on some of those movies. I had a friend that worked on the New Mutants,
Oh yeah, I
and
think you
that
mentioned it.
movie had, even before COVID, that movie had been delayed for years. They shot that in
Mhm.
2017, and for whatever reason, it just kept getting delayed and delayed, and then
Yeah.
the pandemic came, and that just made things worse.
Wow.
Um, I was really excited to see Godzilla versus Kong. They shot that in, I think, 2018,
Mhm.
and that kept getting delayed. And then COVID hit, and then that got delayed further.
Yeah.
And what sucks is that the fan that I am, the hype is not there, and the excitement is not there anymore because of all of those delays.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah,
We've been stuck with seeing just B movies at the drive-ins because there's nothing. I mean,
yeah,
except for maybe Christopher Nolan's Tenet that came out
right.
recently, which was like I don't know. There, I could say so much about that movie. Like it wasn't like a love or hate kind of movie for me. It was just like a what movie. I was just like, I love Christopher Nolan, but I was just mostly like, what did I just watch? This is the movie that brings us back to the movie theaters. I was just like, question mark, question mark.
Yeah,
But anyhow, like we're stuck. aside from Nolan, we're stuck with like these
Yeah.
B movies. Like you and I went to see Unhinged with a
Oh, Russell
Russell
Crowe.
Crowe.
And since then I've been recommending that movie to people.
Oh
And I
my
tell
goodness.
people like that is a great movie to have as a double feature with John Travolta in The Fanatic or
Thank you.
with Michael Douglas in Falling Down.
Oh
I feel like
man.
that would just be like a great double feature or triple
Yeah.
feature for that matter.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
movie was something else. Like I think you and I were just cracking up like for the majority of it, but it also gets really dark and we're just like, "Oh
yeah,
my god, that's so uncomfortable to look at." But we're laughing and cringing at the same time.
yeah,
Because it gets really violent and it's obviously a little over the top. But to see like Russell Crowe as a villain character is so crazy. Like I'm so used to seeing him as like A Beautiful Mind and like
yeah.
Gladiator.
Yeah, not to say that he hasn't played villains before and that he hasn't done it well, because I
Mhm.
remember the first thing that I saw him in was Virtuosity with Denzel Washington,
Oh, I
and
haven't
I
seen that
think
one.
I
Yeah.
think he was like the psychotic killer in that. But still, because he's made a name for himself, finding his niche in playing these very likable characters.
Mhm.
It is kind of like his name alone, and it's kind of funny to see him in that environment where he like I don't know, it just they needed a name actor. They got
Yeah.
Russell Crowe,
And that's the only
and
reason this movie made it this far. That script
yeah,
made it that far.
yeah. When I was in Eureka, there was an independent movie theater that was already open,
Mhm.
and they were showing Tenet, and it kind of makes me wonder. I wonder if like the more independent movie theater chains are going to thrive because
Because of the indie
there's one
films.
here in Chino that's still
Mhm.
open, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I have a weird feeling that the more independent theater chains are going to make it.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on that? Do you think
I
there's
I can kind of see it going both ways. I can see indie film might start bustling and hustling after the pandemic, and that means those movie theaters will be the most active because the big studios want to hold off until like the world is in a better place where they can make the most money, So
yeah,
to them, it's all strategy. And sure, independent film also has strategy and they want to make money back that they've invested in their films. But I do think that's an interesting way to look at it. Like, I would hope that independent film takes you know, a lift from all this, like some
yeah.
kind of like a
Well,
push.
just not necessarily independent film, but independent movie theater
And
chains.
that too. Yeah, yeah. I think it goes
Yeah,
kind
like
of, yeah.
maybe there's like some sort of symbiotic.
Hmm. Unfortunately, I've seen a couple
Yeah,
independent film or independent theaters closing in my area, but then there is other ones that are more of a chain independent.
yeah,
You're familiar with Landmark. They're down here in San Diego as well, in LA.
yeah.
They're still around, and they used to own a smaller one-screen movie theater that unfortunately has since closed. It was
Hmm.
like the go-to for the midnight old classic movie showings, and unfortunately,
Yeah.
they're not around anymore. So, um, yeah.
Is that the one that's close to Mission Beach? Or
No,
no, I'm
that.
thinking of like theater under the cinema
Oh
under the
yeah,
stars
Cinema
or
Under the
something like
Stars.
that.
Yeah, not that
Yeah,
one. I believe they are still open during the pandemic, but
yeah.
I'm sure they're
Which I really want
struggling.
to check out because
Yeah,
I've never been, but I've always
yeah,
heard.
yeah. Same. I've never been. But yeah, the Ken Cinemas is the one that I was referring to,
Hmm.
and it was like owned by Landmark, and they just kind of kept it the way it was, old school one screen
Yeah,
theater where you just kind of go see your old classic films.
yeah.
But yeah, unfortunately, that no longer exists, which is really
It's
sad.
kind of like the New Beverly Cinema
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
Hollywood,
Hmm.
which I recommend you check out because Quentin Tarantino manages that movie theater,
Oh, does he? That's pretty
and every
cool.
now and then he will attend.
Yeah,
He'll
he'll show
like
up.
sit behind you and watch the movies with you.
That's awesome. That's really
Yeah.
cool. Very cool. But yeah, I think on the topic of independent film, it's just like I hope that they get a boost so that these independent movie theaters can stay afloat themselves.
Yeah.
Um, let's hope for that.
Yeah, and
um,
kind of piggybacking on something that you said earlier, I think Yeah, I also have a weird feeling that we're going to see more independent film, or
Hmm.
at least more exposure to independent
Yeah, the
film.
exposure element, because there is a lack of that quality content.
Yeah.
Studios taking that back seat so that they don't lose money.
Hmm.
Who knows? Like independent film might thrive in this, new era of filmmaking.
Yeah.
But then again, it also feels like these independent films would have to have been made already or shot already at least, and are in the process of post production in the moment.
Yeah.
Feel like it's still kind of shaky for a whole feature independent to be filmed in these conditions. It seems
Yeah.
very risky, or just very expensive and lengthy if you do it with
Yeah.
COVID regulations.
I just shot a found footage type horror film that
Hmm.
is part of an anthology.
Yeah.
And even though we were filming outdoors and it, in a general sense, we were keeping a good amount of distance from each other, there were still some risk factors
Yeah.
because, at one point, uh, I had to kill a couple of people and grab them by the neck. But then it was also compensated with the fact that I was ripping off heads up, off of prop
Prop
heads.
dummies.
And yeah, I don't want to like spoil anything, but yeah,
Sounds like your typical like LA life. Like, oh, I just had to go ahead and rip some heads off some dummies last
yeah,
night.
kill a couple of hotties in the woods.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but I mean, it was a blast, and like, yeah, like there was some things had to be choreographed, where there was like close contact,
Hmm.
but I just remember that, right after filming, I was gonna go home and take a shower anyway, and get undressed, and you know be isolated from everybody else. So hopefully
Yeah.
with that like 24-hour cycle, I would be okay. But still, it's like when you're exposed to the elements, it's tricky.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, where it's like, even more sets that have like COVID testing and whatnot done ahead of time.
Hmm.
Who's to say that those people are not going to be interacting in the next few days with other people, and
Yeah.
then therefore their test is kind of like out the door.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I bring it up. Like, yeah, we want to make films. We want to like obviously rush into them and like take hold of the independent film world right now that we have the spotlight on us. But we also have to be safe and protect our crew and our actors,
Hmm.
and make quality content also, like not rush into it just because it's the sake of making stuff.
Yeah.
um yeah, so it's kind of like it's pretty crazy.
But and that could also be a blessing in disguise, because it's often said that our limitations force us to be more creative.
Hmm.
So who knows what things filmmakers will conjure up under these conditions.
Yeah, exactly.
So it'll be
Hopefully,
interesting to see where it goes.
no more unhinged film type films. Or hopefully
I
more
don't know, man.
more of them.
Like, I mean, I had a blast watching Unhinged
Yeah.
for the wrong reasons, but nonetheless, it was a blast.
Yeah, we ran into my two friends that were watching the movie as well that night, and they were just, especially my friend Mark, he was so like not having it. He's like, "That movie was awful. Like, why did I come watch this? What a waste of time." And you and I were just cracking up the whole time. We're just like
Yeah, because you and I embraced the awfulness
the
of,
awfulness of it. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
the unintentional hilarity.
Yeah, yeah. And then we sat through the next screening that came right after that, which was like the new
Yeah,
Shia LaBeouf movie that we didn't care for.
the Shia LaBeouf drug movie directed by David Ayers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we were pretty much just talking from our cars
yeah,
at that point throughout the entire movie. We actually sat through the entire movie just talking, which is
yeah.
hilarious. Um,
Well, we're just gonna talk here for until the credits start. No.
yeah, I was okay. The credits started rolling, and I had to do a double take because I'm like, wait, did you and I just sit here and talk like through that whole movie?
Yeah.
I didn't even realize we had talked that long, but goes to show you.
Yeah, no,
The
but I was grateful
drive-in,
because it made the night more memorable.
yeah, there you go. And you know
Yeah,
what's
like
funny? What's so funny? Like when we drove off like that night, like I was thinking like, damn, what a funny movie, Unhinged that is, to be playing in a drive-in setting where it's like about road rage and like here we are
yeah,
like in our cars and now we're driving off in our cars. It's like it was so strange like to have
it's
that
the
kind of
perfect,
genre of
yeah,
film.
it's the perfect cautionary tale
Yep,
of,
absolutely. Everybody was like extra friendly probably as you're driving like out of the drive-in.
yeah,
Like, oh no, you first, you go ahead, you signaled first or something. I don't know.
it's a comedy of vehicular manners or a comedy of vehicular errors.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm trying to
exactly.
make it sound all fancy and pretentious. But,
Pretentious. Oh my gosh.
mm,
But yeah, it's so crazy. Like, I have no idea where the entertainment industry is going after this, be it film, be it theater. Um, it's just crazy to think about, like, how limited we are in those regards. I don't
yeah.
know. It's
Well,
really
like
crazy.
theater is, doing the whole virtual thing. There's even some theater in Riverside County where they will perform outdoors with designated box areas for people to sit in, so that
Oh,
there's
okay.
so that they could still perform within under the social distancing guidelines, and it's outdoors.
Hmm.
So there, people will find a way. And then there's also doing the whole live stream
Yeah, I'm kind of getting
performances.
over the live streams though. I
Yeah,
feel like that human connection is needed to fully enjoy it.
yeah,
Um,
because otherwise, just go rent the movie.
exactly, exactly. And one of my favorite comedians right now, she's just started like I guess, a drive-in comedy tour. I don't know if you're familiar
Okay.
with Whitney Cummings.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so she just started this. They were actually here in San Diego, I think 2 nights ago. I didn't end up going because some of the cheaper tickets sold out, and it was an expensive show.
yeah,
It was by like carload, and I don't quite feel safe with like a bunch of people in my car right now, so
yeah,
I wasn't
yeah,
one of those. But anyhow, I was really applauding the fact that they were trying to uh, really just make the best of it. Like it was so funny. She was talking
yeah.
about how she hasn't been doing stand up for about 7 months now, and that she
Uh-huh.
was panicking, that she had so much anxiety. And she's like, why did I sign up to be a comedian? I didn't realize how scary this actually was. She was like, I'm going to go up on stage right now, like to talk to people for like an hour.
Yeah, and see that, and that's in itself is material. That's a joke
Yeah, and
in
it's
itself. Yeah,
so
it's
great.
great.
Like I love how open she is about it. She does it with through comedy, obviously, but I'm sure she
Yeah,
actually was nervous. The world has been so crazy lately, and she hasn't been working and being on stage, so she feels like out of sync. And they had people like honking cars instead of actually hearing people laughing. So imagine as a comedian on a stage where you have people honking at you, which you associate with like people being mad
yeah,
at you or like
yeah, yeah,
warning you
yeah.
about an accident or something that's about to happen. But that's just
That's
them
interesting.
appreciating your joke.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting because it would definitely take some time for me to get
To
acclimated to
recover.
hearing
Yeah.
car horns
Yeah.
because yeah, like you said, we associate that with road rage.
Exactly. As we mentioned, Unhinged is all about
Going back
that.
to Unhinged.
What is it that Russell Crowe's character says? Was that a courtesy tap? Or what was the
Oh my
term?
god,
That wasn't a
courtesy tap.
courtesy tap like the big honker, long honk. I am scared now of like not doing or of doing anything longer than a courtesy like honk. Like I am
Yeah,
terrified now.
I just don't do it at all. It's
Yeah,
because I hate it when it's done to me. So
right.
why do it?
I do the courtesy tap when like it's been way too long at a light that's been green and they just been sitting there and they're probably looking at their cell phones.
Yeah.
Like that's like, come on, I'm about to be stuck on red because you were on your phone. That's where I'm like a little love
Yeah.
tap on the honk on the honk.
Yep.
What do you call it? Oh my god, the honk. That sounds horrible.
That term love tap.
The love tap. Yeah, I'm
It just
embarrassing
sounds
myself
so
now.
it sounds so perverted, like almost like a
Oh, we're not going that
yeah,
route. We're talking about road rage, and I was just trying to be
road
try,
rage. Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
I feel
anyhow.
like there's got to be like there's a joke in there somewhere. There's some
No, the
correlation
joke went
between car rate.
away. Watch it, or I'm gonna use my car honk over here. Maybe I have one on my phone.
Um,
Anyhow, Christopher, it's been great talking to you. I want to thank you once again for being here and finally sitting down with me and letting me pick your brain
yeah,
today.
thank you so much for having me. And there, of course, as always, there's so much more that we can talk about.
I
So
know. I was saying the
yeah,
same thing just before this, where I'm like, you and I talked through an entire movie before. I'm sure we could
yeah,
talk through 3 different movies.
and not just any movie, a Shia LaBeouf movie.
Oh gosh, I have a hate love thing with him. I don't know. Oh, but yeah, anyhow. Well, it was great talking to you. I hope that we get to see more drive-in movies together soon and
Yeah.
chit chat and whatnot soon. So,
I was supposed to go to last night. They were having a triple feature of David Lynch films at
oh
the
my
Mission
gosh,
CBD Drive-In. Yeah, it was Lost
that's
Highway,
great.
Mulholland
Yeah.
Drive, and Blue Velvet.
Oh yeah, all the great ones. That would have been amazing.
Yeah,
Hopefully they keep doing more classics at the drive-in so we can go ahead
yeah,
and see some David Lynch and whatnot.
yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for having me, and it's always been a pleasure. Always a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Christopher. We'll get to talk soon some more, all right?
You got it. Thank
All
you.
right.